I had waited for this moment my entire life, the moment I would tell my husband we were having a baby. We had struggled with infertility for years, spent all our savings on treatments, and I had endured agonizing procedures while he simply waited for a miracle to happen. And when that miracle finally did happen, he said I must have been cheating. His mother looked at me like I was dirt, and his brother laughed. That child will be miserable with a mother like that. I stood there, holding the test in my hands, feeling everything around me collapse. But then I promised myself I wouldn't let them destroy me or my child. 2 years later, they were standing outside my office, begging for a meeting. Because now I was the successful owner of a support center for single mothers. And he was unemployed, abandoned by everyone. And the biggest irony? The DNA test proved the child was his after all. My name is Claire, and I was married to Robert for 10 years. We married quite young. I was 24, and back then, I believed I had found the person I would spend my whole life with. Robert was my best friend, my rock, my forever. We built a house together, planned our future, and laughed when friends joked we were the perfect couple. But hidden behind this picture of happiness was something no one knew about: years of fighting for the right to become parents. We tried everything: examinations, hormonal drugs, even IVF. I went through painful procedures, crying myself to sleep from the pain and despair, and he would always say, "Don't worry, Claire. If it doesn't work out, it means it wasn't meant to be." With each passing year, his voice held less support and more fatigue. Sometimes I thought he had resigned himself to the fact that we wouldn't have children. But I hadn't. I still dreamed of hearing a child's laughter in our home. I put off my career, money, time, everything for this dream. And Robert gradually became a stranger. His evenings out with friends grew longer, and his calls with his mother became more frequent. She always hinted, "Maybe it's not you, Claire, but him." But it was easier for him to believe I was the one to blame. But I kept fighting. And I didn't suspect that the day I had waited for so long would become the beginning of my greatest pain. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I felt nauseous, but I had a strange, pleasant feeling inside. I didn't dare say it out loud, even to myself, but something told me this time was different. I went to the bathroom, took the test, and when I saw the 2 distinct lines, my legs gave out. I just sat on the cold tile floor, holding that little piece of plastic in my hands, laughing through my tears. After 10 years of hope, pain, doctors, tests, and humiliation, it happened. I couldn't wait to tell Robert. I bought a pair of tiny booties, put them in a box, and wrapped it with paper that read "Surprise." I even cooked his favorite dinner. I thought this would be the happiest evening of our lives. When he walked in the door, I met him, smiling. "Rob, I have a surprise for you," I said, trembling with excitement. He looked suspiciously at the box, opened it, and froze. I expected him to jump up, hug me, cry like in the movies. But he just stood there. His face was blank, and then a shadow appeared, displeasure. "Is this a test?" he asked dryly. "Yes," I smiled through tears. "Rob, we finally did it. I'm pregnant." He was silent for a few seconds, then lowered his eyes and said in a tone I will never forget, "You know, Claire, I never wanted children." I gasped. "What?" "But, Rob, we've been trying for so many years. We went to the doctors together. We cried together after every failed attempt." He just shrugged. "That was all you wanted. You. I only did it so you wouldn't be upset. But now, I don't see the point. A child will only complicate things." His words hit like knives. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "Yes. And honestly, I'm not even sure if this is my baby," he said, not looking me in the eyes. I felt like the world had stopped. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding the box with the booties, feeling something break inside me. He just walked past, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat down in front of the TV. And I stood there like a ghost, thinking only one thing: how could someone treat the most sacred thing with such contempt? After that evening, a chasm formed between us. We barely spoke. He came home late, ate silently, and slept with his back to me. I tried not to give up. I cooked, I smiled, I talked about the future. but every word was shattered by his indifference. Once, when I timidly asked if he wanted to come with me for an ultrasound, he just smiled bitterly. Why would I? Maybe it's not even my baby? I felt like I'd been struck. What did you say? He raised his voice for the first time since the news. Maybe you cheated on me, Claire. Who knows? You were constantly running off to those tests clinics. Maybe you found someone there to help. I was standing with a cup of tea in my hands and felt my fingers trembling. Robert, you have no right to say that. I have the right to know who I'm living with, he snapped. I'll get a DNA test, so don't get comfortable. It became hard to breathe. You think I could cheat on you? After everything we've been through. He turned away. Just know this, he threw out coldly. Either way, I won't help with the child. You should get an abortion, Claire. You'll save us both a lot of trouble. I don't remember how I got to the bedroom. I just felt the ground giving way beneath my feet. Those words didn't make sense. I loved him. I gave him everything, even myself. And he looked at me like a stranger. When he left the house, I sank to the floor and sat in silence for a long time, hugging my belly. Don't be afraid, little one, I whispered. I will never leave you. But even then, I didn't know the worst was yet to come. Because the humiliation awaiting me at the family dinner would break something deeper than trust, my faith in humanity. A few weeks after that conversation, his mother called me. Claire, we all miss you. Come for dinner on Sunday. We need to talk, she said in her sweet but cold voice. I hesitated. I was afraid to go there, but I still believed that maybe they wanted to reconcile. That family was support. I even printed out the ultrasound, a tiny heart beating inside me. I wanted them to see this child was real, alive, and deserved love. I arrived with a box of homemade pies that Robert always loved. The house smelled of roasted turkey and conversations. His mother immediately sized me up with her usual look. You've lost weight. Or is the baby taking everything useful from you? She asked with an ironic smile. His father didn't even look up from the newspaper. And his brother, Sam, immediately quipped, Oh, pregnant Claire. Well, finally. Maybe you won't be so nervous now. I forced myself to smile. I sat down at the table. The atmosphere was heavy, like before a storm. Robert sat across from me, with a glass of wine. His face was calm, even too calm. And suddenly, when I took out the ultrasound photo to show them all, he looked at it, took a sip, and with a twisted smile, he said, Maybe this isn't even my baby? I froze. Robert, don't start, I whispered. And he, looking me straight in the eye, continued, Maybe you cheated on me. I'm getting a DNA test, so don't get comfortable. His brother laughed. Wow, a DNA test. Maybe it's true. This child will be miserable with a mother like that. Robert's mother sighed, pouring herself more wine. I always said this treatment business was a waste of money. You should have stopped sooner, Claire. A woman needs to know her limits. They all laughed, throwing out phrases that cut me like knives. And Robert sat calmly, not even trying to defend me. I tried to speak, but my voice broke. You have no idea what it's like. I put my hand on my belly. I carried this child under my heart, thinking you would all be happy. Just know this, Robert interrupted. Either way, I won't help with the child. You should get an abortion before it's too late. Silence. Even Sam fell quiet. I felt like the world had paused. Then I simply stood up, placed the ultrasound photo on the table, and said calmly, Don't worry. You can all sleep soundly. I'll make sure you never see this child again. And I walked out. Without tears, without screaming. I simply walked out of the house where no one loved me anymore. After that dinner, I never returned to that house. I walked in the cold rain, holding my hands over my belly, repeating in my mind, We'll manage. We'll manage. Only this time, we was just me and my child. When I returned home, the smell of his cologne still lingered in the air. His jacket was on the couch, our wedding photos on the table. I stared at them for a long time and felt something inside me finally break. That night, I packed a suitcase. No hysterics, no scenes. Just calmly. I took my documents, some clothes, and left the apartment where I had lived for 10 years of my life. I didn't know where to go. My parents lived in another state, and I didn't want to upset them. I rented a small room through an ad, an old apartment in a neighborhood where dogs barked and traffic was loud at night. But for me, it was a new beginning. When I first fell asleep there, on a strange bed with a thin blanket, I woke up in the middle of the night from the silence. And for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not over the loss of Robert, but over the realization that I was now completely alone. My only friend, Lily, found out everything the next day. She came, brought food, a blanket, and just hugged me. Without words. "Claire," she said softly, "don't listen to him. It's not your fault. You deserve to be a mother. And you are not alone." Her words were like a breath of fresh air after a long dive. The following weeks were hell. I got up at 5 to work remotely at my old bookkeeping job, and in the evenings, I went to doctor's appointments. Every step was difficult, physically, morally, financially. But I knew I had to give birth to this child. And when Robert found out that I had decided to keep the baby after all, he called only once. "Claire, you're making a mistake. You won't manage without me." I was silent for a few seconds, then calmly replied, "I will manage. Even better without you." After that call, he disappeared. No calls, no messages, not a penny of help. His family was silent too. To them, I simply ceased to exist. But despite everything, I began to feel a strange freedom. I no longer walked on tiptoes, no longer waited for approval. Every day I reminded myself, "You're strong. You have a purpose." The day the labor started was gloomy, rainy, just like the day I left Robert. As if the sky was reminding me of where it all began. I was sitting in the rented room, packing baby things into a bag, when I suddenly felt a sharp pain. At first, I thought it was just regular cramps, but when it repeated, I realized the time had come. I called a taxi. The driver, an elderly man, looked at me in the mirror and said, "Hold on, miss. We'll make it." When I was put in the ward, I was alone. No one beside me. Just me, my body, and the life I had carried for 9 months, despite everything. Doctors came in, gave instructions, nurses said something encouraging, but all those sounds seemed distant. Only his words echoed in my head. "Maybe this isn't even my baby? Get an abortion." I clenched my fists, screamed in pain, but deep in my soul, there was a feeling, I must go through this alone. When I heard the first cry, tiny but so strong, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. The tears flowed on their own, and I didn't even try to stop them. The nurse placed a small, warm creature wrapped in a blanket on my chest. "Congratulations, Claire. You have a girl." I looked at her, unable to believe this was really my child. So tiny, yet so alive. She wiggled her hand, and I whispered, "Hello, my Grace." I chose that name a long time ago, Grace, God's favor, because she was my miracle. In that moment, it seemed that all the pain, all the humiliation, all the years of struggle vanished. Only we remained. The nurse asked if there was anyone to inform. I just smiled, no, just me. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, watching her sleep in the small clear crib beside me. I didn't know what would happen next, how I would provide for us, where we would live if I would have the strength. But for the first time in a very long time, I was at peace. Because now I knew who to live for. I quietly said, "We will get through everything together, Grace. And I will make sure you never feel what I felt." The first months after Grace's birth were the hardest. I lived on the edge with no money, no support, no sleep. But every time I looked at her, I found the strength. I worked at night, doing bookkeeping for small companies, and during the day, I ran around with the stroller looking for cheap milk and diapers. People sometimes looked with pity, but I was no longer ashamed. Because every day with my daughter was proof that I survived. Once, in a pharmacy line, I met a young woman who was also raising a child alone. We started talking. Her story was similar to mine. And then I thought for the first time, how many of us are there? How many women who deserve not pity, but support? That's how the idea was born, to create a place where single mothers could get help. I started with a small room that I rented with my friend, Lily. Then came volunteers, donations, and the first success stories. 2 years passed, and I was already managing a small support center for single mothers. I saw other women find strength within themselves, the same strength I once searched for in the dark. Sometimes, standing by my office window, watching Grace laugh in the children's corner, I thought, this is what I went through all that for. To become not a victim, but an example. Almost 2 years passed. My life became completely different, simpler, but real. I woke up to Grace's laughter, drank coffee by the window, and thanked God that I no longer woke up to Robert's indifferent gaze. And then he appeared. First, a message on Facebook. "Hi, Claire. I saw the news about your center. You're doing great. How's Grace?" I read it and stared at the screen for a long time. My hands trembled not from fear, but from anger. He didn't even know the color of our daughter's eyes. I didn't reply. A few weeks later, he wrote again. "I'd like to meet. To see you both. Maybe talk." I was curious, why now? And then I found out. His company went bankrupt. He lost his job, his car, his apartment. His new girlfriend left him, leaving only debts. And his mother, the one who once scorned me, was now seriously ill. And so he, the once confident, self-assured Robert, stood at the door of my center. In an old jacket with tired eyes, holding flowers that looked like he'd bought them with his last money. "Claire," he said softly, "I know I don't even have the right to stand here. But I regret it. Everything." I was silent. Everything flashed through my mind. Every humiliation, every tear, every one of his laughs at my pain. "I just want to see my daughter," he continued. "I made a lot of mistakes. I was a fool. But I'm her father." I took a deep breath, looking him straight in the eyes. "Father," I repeated. "You disowned her before she was even born. You told me to have an abortion, Robert." He bowed his head. "I know, but I didn't understand what I was losing then." "You understand now," I replied coldly. "But it's too late." I didn't yell, I didn't cry. My strength was now in my calm. He stood silently, clutching the flowers. And I looked at him and thought, here it is, true justice, when the one who once scorned now begs for a drop of your attention. I turned and walked to my office. Behind the door, a quiet sob could be heard, but it wasn't mine anymore.